I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm going to be talking about the Watch It Played and Game Night Picks situation. Situation might be too light of a word, but controversy and drama feels like loaded terms. Even the video title, I'm going to be doing my best to keep this video title as neutral as possible. I don't like talking about other content creators. I really don't, and I certainly don't want to make it a drama post that's just for views and like, hey, drama and all those things. Like, we'll talk about the stuff, but the title and thumbnail I'm going to try to leave as neutral as possible. But I also did want to talk about this for a specific reason, and at first I wasn't going to, and the more things came out, the more I felt that there was reason enough to talk about it, which we'll get to later in the video. With that said, timestamps to everything down below. Also, in case you don't know, like, you might not know already, depending on who you are, you might already know some of what's going on. You might know none of what's going on. But the most important thing I wanted to get in here early, because of there's so many people who are tangentially involved in the situation, not through their actions, but through their associations. So I want to be very clear who this video is about and who it's not about. There's a situation right now going on between Rodney Smith from Watch It Played and Chaz Marler from Game Night Picks. Previously, Paradise, I think was the channel name, but these are the two people involved in this conversation. There's so many people who are tangentially involved through their collaborations with those two who are not involved in this situation, or at least there's no reason to think they're involved in any capacity, and so I want to be very clear who it is and who it is not about. Because Watch It Played has worked with Monique and Naveen from Before You Play, as well as Paula Deming, as well as Matthew Jude, and all four of those people are not involved in this current situation. Watch It Played has also worked with Chaz Marler, both on the Watch It Play channel, and then Chaz Marler separately has Game Night Picks as his own channel as well. On the Game Night Picks channel, Chaz works with Paula Deming, Eric Myers, Grant Lyon, and Matthew Jude. So overlapping people who have worked on both channels. None of these other people are in any way involved, and I think that's important because as much as this video is not designed to be a witch hunt of any kind, when there is any drama, when there can be any whiff of wrongdoing, sometimes the internet can do its thing with the pitchforks and all that, which I do not want you to do, and I do not think you should do. That's not the point of this video. But at the very least, you should be very aware of who the video is not about, as much as you are aware of who it is about. That's the first thing I want to get out of the way. The second thing I kind of touched upon already, I don't like talking about other content creators. I really don't. I feel like, this has not been a good week for this. Like, literally just last week, I was like, hey, I was debating whether to talk about the Sam Healy and the Dice Tower situation, but I don't love talking negatively about other content creators. I really don't enjoy talking negatively, well, about anyone, but particularly my peers. Particularly people who are doing the same thing as I'm doing. I feel a certain sense of allegiance to every content creator, whether or not I know or even like you for that matter. I feel like, hey, we're all doing this thing, we're all like sweating the sweat, that sounds terrible. We're all going through the daily grind of content creation. We are all peers, we all have to interact in some way, we ship games to each other, we see each other at conventions, like, and we're doing the same thing, and it's not the easiest job, it's not the hardest job, but it's not the easiest job, and so I have the sense of, allegiance to content creators, whether I like them personally or not, whether I like their content or not. And I think that especially as someone with a platform, I'm very wary of the concept of flame wars to an extent. I don't want my platform to be used as like that every time I get up on a video, I'm now talking crap about some other content creator and carrying on a beef for the next 14 years. I don't want that. And so I'm so mindful about, again, I said this last week when I talked about Sam, perhaps I'm too mindful about other content creators with the same diligence I should apply to anything and everyone that I talk about. I don't know. But my own bias is present. I don't like talking about the content creators. And so at first I was not going to talk about the situation, and the more things came out, the more it shifted from, well, that's not true. I was going to talk about it, but I was going to do a little, brief coverage of what's going on in my week in review. But I didn't want to do a dedicated video. And then the more came out about it, the more I felt that doing a dedicated video does make sense to a degree, especially given what we've seen so far. And I'll say that most of what we're going to cover today is coming from Rodney Smith from Watch It Played. There's also a statement from Chaz Marler. I have reached out for additional opportunities to clarify. He gave me a very nice, but at the moment I'm not at liberty to talk about things. It is both, well, we'll get more into it later. But I have reached out to Chaz Marler to allow him to try to add more to his side, because most of what we're getting is from Rodney Smith and Watch It Played. This is a whole lot of preamble before we get to what's going on. So let's talk about what's going on. Again, some of you already know, some of you don't. Watch It Play is one of the biggest channels in the board game content creation space. Game Night's Picks has very quickly become one of the biggest channels in the board game content creator space. Watch It Play has been doing this for 10 years. I believe Game Night Picks is a rebranding of Paradise, which is Chaz's original channel, which I believe had around 20k, this is a recollection, I believe had around 20k subscribers before he started up again recently, and then it ballooned upwards very quickly to 193,000, I think it's at right now. That's where it's currently at. Very recently, Rodney posted on his own, not his own channel, but his own pages, I think Blue Sky, if I'm not mistaken, his Facebook page, a link to an unlisted video and a statement. If you want to go through this all on your own, my recommended reading order is reading Rodney's statement. It's about 5 pages. It's not super hard to consume, but it's, it's definitely some stuff. Reading the 5 pages of his overview of the situation, then watching his video of the situation, and then I'll link to a specific post on Board Game Geek that I think further drills down into the nature of some of this data. So if you wanted to go through it from his perspective before you get my own, because I am going to cover the situation, but I'm not going to cover it in as much detail as 5 pages, plus a full video, plus a further breakdown. If you want that, that would be my recommended reading order. I'll link to it down below, step 1, step 2, step 3, so you can consume it on your own. But that said, the general overview of the situation is that it seems like recently Rodney became aware, this is from his own words, so a lot of this is going to go under the allegedly category. Rodney recently became aware that Game Night Picks as a channel was effectively utilizing the same advertising technique that I believe they did on Watch It Played, of basically a pay-per-view kind of rate. So if you as a publisher want to promote Game X, right now as I'm filming this we have Brass Pittsburgh, probably should not be lumping Roxley into this conversation, although that's a great segue. It's a great segue to talk about the fact that thank you for Allplay for being a channel sponsor, and once we're talking about publishers who may not want to be linked to drama, Allplay is a channel sponsor. They have nothing to do with the current situation, but they are a fantastic company where you could get anything from the shelves behind me to a variety of accessible board games, to board game bags, to board game playmats, and as well if you go to allplay.com you can get games from themselves as well as a variety of partner publishers. This was an ad spot effectively. In the case of the Allplay, they are a channel sponsor, they're not paying for a specific ad spot. But hypothetically, if you were Allplay, let's leave Roxley out of this now that Allplay's already here, if you were Allplay and you said, hey, Watch It Played, or Game Night Picks, we have an upcoming crowdfunding campaign for Mountain Ghost Legacy. We would love for you to talk about it in a video. Game Night Picks effectively has a cost structure that is based on the views you get, I assume within a certain time period, I don't know if that was specified, but the views you get determine your rate. So, they have a general cost. If the video that your ad spot goes in, if they're talking about like 10 games to table this week, and then 3 minutes into the video they're like, and by the way, check out Allplay Mountain Ghost Legacy, go to the crowdfunding campaign. And if that video gets, I don't know, 300 views, there's a certain rate. If it gets 3,000 views, it's 10 times more expensive. If it gets 30,000 views, it's 100 times more expensive. Effectively, you're charging per view. You are being charged by Game Night Picks per view that the video gets, because the more views, the more exposure, the more people find out about Mountain Ghost Legacy. It's not a crazy general cost structure of paying for impressions, for clicks, for views, effectively for the degree of engagement, in this case engagement being measured by the views the video gets. That is the cost structure that Game Night Picks has. The problem is that, according to Rodney, and this is not contradicted by Chaz, according to Rodney, Game Night Picks was utilizing YouTube's promotional paying to boost your views method. This is an opportunity, for those who don't know, this is an opportunity that you have on YouTube, where it's not, you're not buying, bot accounts from some other third party. You are using YouTube's own promotional tools, and you're setting a budget, and you're saying, hey, I'm going to pay $400, and I want this video to reach an additional 30,000 people. So you're paying money to have your video reach more people. Those people might watch, they might engage, they might subscribe. You're basically paying for a unnatural degree of audience awareness. And the unnatural is an important distinction because of some of the things we're going to get to shortly. This tool was being used by Game Night Picks on a variety of the videos. You can see over the past several months how they went from kind of growing a little bit, getting a few thousand views per video, to very quickly. You can go through the videos, go to their channel, check videos, sort by most recent, and just literally scroll down, and you can see very quickly the point where they started getting from 2,000 views per video, or 2,000 to 3,000 views per video, to jumping to 30,000 views per video, generally speaking. Along with that came a whole lot of subscribers. On the surface, this may not appear to be a problem, because on the surface, you're like, okay, well, Game Night Picks is charging a publisher to have their ad spot based on the number of views, and then they got more views. What's the problem? They went out and hunted those views, they got the exposure that they are charging the publisher for. The reason this is a problem is because of the nature of the levels of engagement. This is where you can watch a whole bunch of videos from a variety of people talking about the nature of YouTube's tools, where you are paying for an audience and how you are getting a very low quality audience that does not engage. Again, Rodney goes into this in his full breakdown, you can check that out, but it talks about the lower nature of the engagement and the views, and this is also something you can see because something I did on my own is I went to Game Night Picks and I checked out the channel. Hey buddy, you want to come up here? I got a cat wandering around. I went to Chaz's channel. I looked at a bunch of the videos. If you look at the average comments on videos when they were getting 2,000 to 3,000 views, they were getting around 50 comments per video. If you look at their average comments on the videos, when within a matter of months, they jumped to having 193,000 subscribers and 30,000 views per video, they are still getting around 50 comments per video. Their comments per video have not changed in any meaningful sense. Their engagement has not changed in any meaningful sense. Something that Rodney shared is the statistics of the drop-off, the view drop-off on those views. Because of the fact that you are paying for these views, you are not getting a naturally engaged audience who is interested in the topic at hand. YouTube is pushing this out. They are hawking your video to people who are less interested in that video to get you the views and possibly subscribers that you wanted. The problem with that is it's low engagement, there's not watching to the same extent, and so that ad that you placed 4 minutes into the video, in a normal video, you might have 70% of the viewers engaging with that ad, seeing that ad. But because of the nature of this paying for views and subscribers, you suddenly have a significantly lower percentage. I can't remember the exact quote, it'll be in Rodney's breakdown, but maybe instead of having 70%, you have 4% or 5% of those views seeing that ad. You are charging a rate to the publishers based on an assumed degree of knowledge. Oh no, you cannot, no, you cannot. My cat is, buddy, this is where he's like literally pushing the camera away. But you are charging a rate to the publishers based on a perceived degree of how things normally work, and instead it's not working that way at all. You're getting much lower quality engagement and metrics. So you're basically charging a higher rate with an understood assumption that's not happening. That's kind of what's going on. The example I gave in a forum post is it's the equivalent of selling a 1 to 5 player game, but the 1 player game is actually you just playing both sides against each other in this competitive game. They're like, hey, by the way, 1 player game, simulate both players and play it. Is that technically true? Sure. Is that what you thought you were signing up for when you bought that game? Not in the slightest. That's the overall situation that's been happening. This is something that my own 2 cents from this is I've been aware of Game Night Picks for a while now, and I've seen the rapid growth of the channel, and I didn't assume, because I know who's involved, I never once assumed any degree of malice. I have seen other channels over time occasionally get a brief bump or quick growth, and I have often wondered which channels are effectively paying for artificial inflation of your numbers, which is not great for engagement, but it does make things look better. I never once thought that about Game Night Picks because I don't know Chaz personally, but I've always liked his content, and I tend to think well of people who've been in this industry for a while, so I didn't assume that would ever be a thing that was happening there. But what I did think, and this is actually something Rodney mentions in a forum post at one point, but what I did think is I thought, oh, because of his association with Watch It Played, and because of all the people involved, they were able to get a large portion of that audience to jump over very quickly. Because going to 193,000 subscribers in a matter of months is nearly unheard of. I won't say not nearly. It is unheard of in the board game content creator space. That is something that takes years and years and years and years to even the absolute best and fastest growing channels have never seen that kind of growth. This would be a level of growth that has eclipsed anything out there, and I just wrote it off as, hey, I guess because of the collaboration, we're seeing that audience migrate over at a speed that we've never seen before. That's what I kind of innocently assumed. It is reasonable for a publisher to assume the same kind of thing. That the views per video, that the subscribers per video are a natural development of the growth based on who is involved, and that therefore it is real engagement and a real degree of what you're paying for is what you're getting. Because I've seen a lot of calls, not a lot, I've seen in this whole drama, I've seen a few calls from people who are like, well, publishers should know better, they should look more into things. And I think that is nice, but I think that is assuming too much. I assume that the people involved should know better, and the people who are possibly engaging in what could be seen as deceitful, they should know better. Should everyone else do the due diligence? Sure. But I tend to I tend to not love victim blaming in general. Like, sure, publishers should do their due diligence. People shouldn't force people to need to do their due diligence. Anyways, going back to the whole situation in the story, Rodney talked to Chaz. It seems like that did not go well as far as the desired resolution. Chaz indicated that they would be offering some degree of partial discounts, not equitable to the level of what they were paying for versus what they got, but something. And in the end of it all, and again, I highly encourage you to read Rodney's post and watch this video for the full breakdown. I'm being very particular about what I say over here. At the end of it all, Rodney decided to cut ties with Chaz, both a 10-year friendship and a 6-year business relationship, because Rodney wanted to be away from this with a 10-foot pole, and then some. Part of the concern is that because of Chaz's affiliation with Watch It Played, it is very easy for people to assume that there's a degree of knowledge of what's going on and or the same thing happening. This is something I can very much resonate with based on my own past history, which we'll get to later in this video. But there's a degree of an assumed, okay, well, if this comes to light and this is going on, if this is what Game Night Picks is doing, well, over on Watch It Played when I've paid for ads, the same thing is probably happening. And according to Rodney, he has never once paid for any of these promotional tools, artificial growth of any kind, and did not want to be tarred with that brush. That is a kind of summation of what's going on. A quick summary of that is effectively, over on Game Night Picks, they were paying for various degrees of artificial inflation of numbers, of both subscribers and views, that did not translate into real engagement. This is something you can check and investigate for yourself. And then it also did not translate into people seeing their ads. This is something we're seeing from the metrics that Rodney shared. Meanwhile, Game Night Picks is charging publishers based on the perceived level of engagement and views that they are getting. In reality, they are not actually getting, and proportional refunds do not seem to have been assigned to those publishers, and seemingly deceptive practices were engaged with, which we'll come to more, because there is more to get into. This is all the stuff that I was not going to do a full video about. This is all the stuff that I was going to just mention in my weekly news segment. What we know from each side is almost all of this is from Rodney. Chaz issued a statement. I will pause for a second and put it up on the screen so you can read it now. I will just pause for a second so you can pause the video. This is Chaz's statement. If you read it fully, the main takeaway that I have of the statement is that in no way does it contradict anything that Rodney said. In fact, it perfectly lines up with everything that Rodney said. It just says it in a way that sounds more palatable, which is tricky. Because I get that spin is a thing. Spin of news, of perceptions, biases. These are all real concepts that do matter. But when someone says, here are all these really, really bad things that happened, and you don't disagree with those bad things, you just make them sound better while saying the same thing, from my own outside perspective, it doesn't look good. It looks like you are agreeing with everything that was said, while doing so in a way that makes it sound more palatable. Yes, this is a different cat. They like to wander around in different ways. And she has claws. They all have claws. She just has sharper claws. I reached out to Chaz asking if he wants to provide additional context, hop on a call, go into it. He said that he can't go into it right now. His response, while kind, and again, I wish Chaz well, I don't want negative anything for anyone, but his response was effectively, could be seen as, I can't get into this for legal reasons because, I don't want to, whatever. It also could be seen as I don't have anything that paints it in a better light. And unfortunately, my own bias, given his first statement not contradicting anything Rodney said, and given his subsequent not proceeding to comment further, while there absolutely could be good legal reasons to not comment further, my initial bias, this is not a fact, this is my own opinion and bias, is that it does seem like Chaz doesn't have further things that could be said in a defensible manner outside of what Rodney has already painted, which again, I think doesn't look great, but it gets worse, unfortunately. That's, again, we haven't got to the part why I decided to make a video. There's one particular thing that was the line for me that moved this from, it moved the scale for me. Again, I'll link down below. You should read Rodney's statement, watch his video, and then read his further follow-up post that explains the metrics and how they all work. But like I said already, it's important to note that Chaz has not contradicted anything Rodney has said, and then there are two notable incidents past there that were part of why I wanted to talk about this. And I'll link to them both one at a time, but first I'll link to, again, I'll put a screenshot up here. There'll be another screenshot to a publisher email, a publisher shared Mark from Radical 8 Games, the game Spokes is fun, by the way, but he posted a screenshot, not a screenshot, he copied and pasted the text, that does matter. He copied and pasted the text of an email he got from Chaz, and I'll put that over here. You can pause to read. Effectively, this is an email that he's getting where he says, okay, here's Chaz from Game Night Picks, etc., 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 answer these questions, and we will, give you a promotional discount on 25%, I believe it's 25% off discount on various spots from Game Night Picks and from Watcher Played. Rodney is in that thread saying that Rodney was not aware that these discounts were being applied on his behalf for something from Game Night Picks, which is already not great. He said, she said to a degree, but also no contradiction on the she said part. Separately from that, Mark talks about how these discounts were offered, and though to be clear, language matters, Mark doesn't say that these discounts were offered. He says that he was offered heavily discounted rates. He said, I'm interested in them, and then was told, oh, we actually don't have any more of those, but we can give you these other rates instead. So that does feel like a bait and switch. I don't know if that was the same 25% rate or not. I don't know if it's the same one as listed in the email. You can see the whole thing and read it for yourself. But effectively, there's two issues there. One is the bait and switch of, here's a discount. No, never mind, it's gone, actually, and we didn't say first come, first serve. And then number two is the fact that discounts are being offered for Watcher Played content without Watcher Played's awareness. Whether those discounts happened or not, maybe that goes to the bait and switch. Maybe Rodney never has to know if those discounts never actually get offered once somebody wants them. But again, I don't know that. I don't know if it's the same I don't know which discounts were baited and switched. The second, and far more troubling one, the thing that really pushed me over the edge to decide that this was a topic worth covering because of how bad it is, that it moved a little bit past perception, and it moved the needle for me. I'm going to pause and post it up. This is another email that went out from Game Night Picks to publishers, to their mailing list. This is an email from Chaz. Again, pause and read. This is the last one. Anyways, what does that say? Hey, Chaz here. A funny thing happened. While we're at PAX Unplugged, our subscribers started to grow. And then if you keep going, it talks about how Arcane Wonders, who again probably doesn't want to be associated with this, because they were running ads for Roz, A Dance of Love, another great game by the way. Because of that, it looks like YouTube suggested that video to an international audience and has continued to suggest more videos to an international audience. This entire email that was sent out, moves the needle because you could make an argument. You could absolutely make an argument that various tactics were engaged with by Game Night Picks in an effort of generating various, growth of the channel. And then, again, based on Chaz's statement, and then those tactics didn't work out, and so we stopped using them and, aim to commit transparency, etc., and all that, and no longer doing these things. You could look at this through the lens of nothing nefarious was ever intended. That justification goes away a little bit when you look at an email that is effectively laying the groundwork, deceptively laying the groundwork for what has been happening. There's a whole lot of growth, so hey, let's get in front of this and tell people our theory as to how that growth happened. A funny thing happened, we paid for views, we didn't tell you that, and the views increased, and the subscribers increased. In fact, we're going to tell you that, look, we got all these subscribers, and the views increased too, which is good. They're sticking around to watch the video. They're actually not. Based on Chaz's other statement, they looked at the results and have changed. They found these tactics to be not helpful. The problem is this entire email reads as a cover for what happened next. And that is the biggest, most problematic thing here, because it seems to indicate that he knew what he was doing was not going to be perceived as a normal way of getting additional views. He came up with a justification for the rapid growth of the channel. He even mentions the international audience, which is interesting, and I wonder if that's because in general, the way YouTube works over here with the promotional content is the more different, depending on where you're trying to get your audience from, you might have different rates. It is probably cheaper to get your increased audience in different regions that might be less helpful to your actual product. If you are advertising a bunch of board games that might be more domestically related and you get an international audience, it's not even more helpful for you. Which means if Chaz was engaging with these he can acknowledge he was, if he's engaging in these promotional tactics and he's paying for an international audience, it is interesting that he's using Roz to justify the international audience in case anyone sees those metrics or can engage with those metrics. Again, I can't speak to what is going on in Chaz's mind. I can only tell you what it looks like from the outside. And from the outside, it looks like Chaz was engaging in practices that he knew were not going to be approved of, laying the groundwork to deceptively prep and explain the channel's rapid growth and acceleration, while ignoring the fact that he is actually doing something else that is directly contradicting what he's saying is going on. It's lying. I mean, I don't see a different way to view it here. I see it as lying. You could argue it was as a white lie. It wasn't intended to be anything negative. You could argue a lot of justifications, but it certainly comes across as lying. And that particular email was the line for me that pushed this to something that I definitely don't love and don't think is ethically sound, into the realm of something that moves to, I don't want to use the word fraud casually, looks like fraud. That's what I say. There's a lot of calls for clarity and transparency in the content creation space. There's one thing to not disclose something. It's another thing to intentionally paint a picture to make it look like something else. That is, I don't know what the legal definition of fraud is, but it feels fraudulent. That doesn't mean it is fraudulent. It feels fraudulent. That's kind of the overall situation here. My own takeaway, before I get into a little more of this video, my own takeaway from the outside looking in is this does not look good for game night picks. This doesn't look good for content creators in general, which brings us to why am I talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this is because there's always been a degree of distrust for content creators in a segment of the audience, not the vast majority of the audience. Most people are watching YouTube videos from their content creators and are happy to watch them. But if you go into sections of Reddit on Board Game Geek, there's always people who hate content creators. They're grifters, they're liars, they're shills, they're just interested in getting a free board game, and they'll tell you how much they like this board game because that's all they need to do to get a free board game. And it's always been an uphill battle to fight that narrative. It doesn't make sense the way it's generally presented. The amount of work that goes into covering things to get your free $30 game is never really worth it. But nonetheless, regardless of the fact that it, as a general construct, doesn't actually make sense, this is not the easiest job by any means. Not the amount of work you put in to get a free board game. There are easier ways to get that $30. But again, it's been an uphill battle to fight that narrative in general. There is distrust from a segment of the audience in the nature of the content creator ecosystem. And I understand where that distrust comes from, and unfortunately things like this make it work. Bad actors do exist. And I don't talk a lot about my own past situation with Jesse, with Quackalope. But this whole situation did very much remind me of it, because my friendship, and again, I'm not going to go into this heavily in detail because I'm not trying, again, I really hate talking negatively about people. My friendship with Jesse, with Quackalope, was a real friendship, and it's worth noting that he did a lot of good. He helped out a lot of small publishers, small indie publishers, he did a lot of free work for them, intentionally so, because, hey, let's help these small indie startups work out. He built a thriving community that was a very close-knit community. During COVID, during lockdown, he ran like a Thanksgiving con, an online con. Like, there was a lot of good that Jesse did. But also, over the years of working with him, collaborating with him for the most part. We had our Quack & Co channel, but for the most part, we were doing our own things with a lot of collaboration. Over the years, I definitely saw some things that I didn't personally love, that I felt didn't necessarily reflect great on the overall. There are some things he did that I didn't necessarily love. And it reminds me of the situation because Rodney was significantly more tied to Chaz than I ever was with Quackalope. And therefore, the potential fallout is significantly bigger, as Rodney talks about himself, about the nature of potentially being perceived of these same advertising partners thinking things could go wrong. Because for myself, with Quackalope, I just slowly started doing less things together as I realized we had different standards. And I try not to be too... Something I always try to be mindful of is we all have different standards. I work for GameFound. There are some people who cannot stand the fact that I am both doing content around board games while working for GameFound. And I understand that. We all have different standards as to what we are okay with. And so I always try to view things through the light of, there were things I didn't like, but there are things about me that others wouldn't like or wouldn't want. But either way, I try to separate, but I try to do so quietly. And then when the whole drama did blow up, because there was a whole Quackalope controversy, even though I hadn't really done videos with him for like 8 months, I was still associated enough that overnight, for something I never did and had nothing to do with, I lost 300 subscribers overnight for something someone else did, even though I hadn't done a video with the guy in 8 months. And so I understand these perceptions of these ties within the community. I understand the perception of bad actors and how things can play out. And I understand Rodney's position that he's in, being very much tied to someone who's engaging in a practice that Rodney very much disagrees with, that Watch Play disagrees with. And I think when it comes to trust in the content creator ecosystem, I think you absolutely should know who you're watching and whether their content works for you. Because there are different kinds of content creators. There are channels that are mostly positive about the games they cover. There are channels that are only ever cashing a check while showing you the newest, hottest game. And I don't say that in a negative sense. I mean that they're effectively an advertising channel. All they do is they take a check, they show you a new hot game, and that's all they do. And you should know which channels work for you or not, because it's easy to see someone's like talking about this newest game and making it sound like the greatest thing. And if you don't realize that that's a sponsored content engagement, then it can add to your distrust in the content creator ecosystem. You're like, well, that person told me that game is great, and they were just getting a check for it the whole time. Hopefully they disclosed it. If you don't disclose it, is where the real problem comes in, because then who do you know to trust? If I tell you that I love this game and it's a 5 out of 5, something I only do like 5 times a year, 6 times a year, but like nonetheless, it's easy to watch those and be like, yeah, let's cash this check from that company. I'm like, what about all the other games? What about all the other games I didn't cash a check for? But again, if you only watch certain content, if you feel misled and deceived by other content creators who weren't necessarily transparent about when there was sponsored content versus when it wasn't, it can certainly add to your level of distrust in the ecosystem. And so I do encourage you to know the channels that you watch. Don't just pay attention to that random video that showed up through your feed. Subscribe to that person. Pay attention over time. Are they always positive? Does that work for you? Are they clearly a sponsored content channel? Does that work for you? I am not encouraging you to stop watching anything. I'm encouraging you to know the types of content you get value from, know whether they are always positive, know whether they're sponsored content, and know whether it's review content. Learn to tell the difference, and that way, hopefully by following content creators who you've developed that relationship with, not real relationship, that parasocial aspect of, I like their content and it clearly works for me, those are the content creators you want to pay attention to. There's a difference between not liking a certain kind of content and finding it doesn't work for you versus outright deception. That's why I wanted to this video. There is already distrust for the content creator ecosystem. And I think by not talking about these things, to a certain extent, it can encourage the narrative or the idea that we're going to protect our own, so to speak. That we just want to brush it under the rug so that if we don't talk about it, you don't have to worry about it. But I don't think it works that way. I think there have been very few incidents of strong deception like what you're seeing right now in the content creator space. I think there absolutely are people who might not work for you because of the way they approach their content. But that's a very, very different conversation than people who are willing to lie to you for a free board game, which is a very different conversation. I feel bad for Rodney. I feel bad for Chaz even. I feel bad for the publishers involved. I mostly feel bad for Paula, Eric, Grant, Matthew, Monique, and Naveen. All fantastic. Actually, I don't know Eric, so I can't say that. Eric, I don't know who you are. I've never actually worked with you, but Paula, Grant, Matthew, Monique, and Naveen, I've interacted with all of them. They are all lovely human beings who seem incredible in every way. And Eric, I don't know you, but I hope you fall into the same umbrella. I feel mostly bad for them for being swept up in drama not of their own making. I'll link to everything down below so you can do a further deep dive on your own. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.